Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? Here on Behind the Star, we share stories about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Central Florida's largest law enforcement agency. From forensics to dispatch to the deputies on patrol, we'll talk to the brave men and women who protect our community. This is Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. My name is Jon Busdeker, the host of Behind the Star, and thank you again for joining us here. And here on Behind the Star, we talk about all the things that go on here at the Sheriff's Office, and we talk to people that work here, both civilians and sworn officers. And before we get into today's episode, I do want to give a warning. We're probably going to talk about some things that might be disturbing to some people and not necessarily graphic, but we just want to give people a warning because there might be some content here that might not be suitable for everybody. So with that, I want to introduce Detective Corporal Nikki Harper of the Sex Crimes Unit. Thanks for being here on Behind the Star.
No problem.
So as I said, we're probably going to talk about some things that not necessarily graphic, but just maybe not suitable for all audiences. So Before we get too far, why don't you explain, Nikki, what exactly is a sex crime?
Well, it could happen to an adult or a child, and it's anything of a sexual nature that is criminal. So it could be anything from a sexual battery, a capital sexual battery, which is, you go into all sorts of things like, it depends on ages and things like that. And then we have exposure cases, anything really that's sexual in nature.
Okay, so it's sort of a wide range of
wide
topics.
Yeah.
And so tell me about this unit. Like how many people work in this unit? Tell me about the makeup of the unit.
So right now we have one sergeant, one corporal. We're about to go to 2 corporals. We have 10 detectives, and hopefully sometime next year we're going to be up to 13.
Okay, all right. So, is that pretty average? 13 detectives for a county our size, for an agency
our size? We're pretty busy. I mean, I was in this unit as a detective a few years ago, and at one point we were down to 7.
Oh,
and it's impossible. You just can't function because of how busy this unit is. I think we're probably one of the busiest, if not the busiest unit in this agency.
So that's not good to hear, but it is good that we have the staffing to take care of those crimes and work on those crimes. So tell me, how does this work? I mean, how do the crimes come in? I mean, do people report them? Do you have people coming in here? Are you out there finding people? How does it work here?
It really does depend. The majority of our cases come in from initial reports from road patrol. So they'll get filtered to us after about a day, and then we will take a look. And as a supervisor, we will assign the cases to the detectives. If it's something acute or requires a call out from our detectives, we'll go out straight away. The patrol will call us or call the on-call detective and say, hey, this is what's going on, and then they'll head out. Or if, for example, if we have a missing child, which is what we also deal with. Okay. I know we have a missing persons unit, but if we have a missing child and they're not an obvious runaway, that's something we respond to.
Okay.
And that would be the entire unit would go out to that.
So right now we'll just say you have 10 detectives. Are they all sort of specialized on certain things? Or like does one person work on maybe underage sex and then another one's on maybe rape or how does that work?
No, they all do the same thing. We only have one person who is a bit more specialized, and he deals more with cyber crimes.
And we'll get into that.
Yeah. So he gets tips in from basically online tips, so child pornography and things like that. He works those specifically. He's also in our call out rotation, so he will go out on his call day and things like that, but that's his kind of niche, all that techie stuff that I'm not very familiar with.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So like I said, I do want to explore some of that a little bit because I'm sure that is I don't want to say new because we've had the internet for 20 years now, but I'm sure it's a changing.
It's growing.
It's growing, yeah. Exactly. So before we get too far, I usually like to go back a little bit. How did you end up here in the sex crimes unit?
Well, my first time around in 2014, I came up. I cross-trained prior to that for about 8 months. And then I was selected to come up, and I was here from 2014 to 2017. 2017, I got promoted to corporal. And obviously, when you're promoted here, you go back to the road.
Yeah.
And then in March of this year, I was selected to come back as a corporal.
Okay. All right. So you've done a few things around the agency.
I have. Yeah.
So I will, before we even go even farther, I do want to say if you're listening right now, you might hear a little bit of an accent from our corporal here. Can you tell people where you're from originally?
So I'm originally from England. I left England when I was I was almost 20 when I came here.
Okay.
So I've been here for about 17 years.
Where at in England?
I was born in Leeds, which is in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
But at 18 and a half, I joined the Metropolitan Police. I was a very young cop down in London. And then I was there for a little while, and then I left to move here. And I was going to go back after a year, but 17 years later,
that's what happened. That's what happens when you move to Central Florida.
Exactly.
You think, I'll do a year or two, and I'm moving on, and then you say, it's not so bad.
No,
here.
I'm 17, and my family's here. My parents live here. I'm married now. I have a child, so I'm not going anywhere. This is home now.
Did you leave the London police to come work here at the sheriff's office? No,
I couldn't. I wasn't a citizen at the time. So I had to wait to get my citizenship. So I actually started at this agency as a 911 call taker.
Oh, okay.
Back in 2009. And then I went to dispatch after about 3 months. And then I did that for maybe a year. And then I was sponsored to become sworn.
Okay. So at some point you ended up here in the sex crimes unit. Did you choose to want to work here, or were you assigned here?
No. It was a choice. I cross-trained with a bunch of different units when I was looking to move out of patrol. And this was the one that I found more rewarding, more interesting, and more investigative. So I'm not the kind of person who likes to go and jump fences and run after people and things like that.
Yeah.
I really like the investigative side of crimes. So,
and I think that's really interesting. I think a lot of people think, if you're going to become a deputy, that's the job. You got to go running after people. And part of it is, if you do that, that's fine. There's a lot of people that are great at that, but there's a lot of other units here and types of jobs here at the sheriff's office that you get to use other skills.
Absolutely.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And I have to say, when I came to this unit as a detective, it made me a much better cop. I got a lot of experience in interviewing, victims and suspects, a much better understanding of Miranda rights and things like that. So it really did make me a much more well-rounded officer. Okay,
so let's talk about that a little bit here in sex crimes. What's the cases that you work on? Is there a typical one, or is there one that comes in more often than other ones, or is there something that the team works on more than others?
No, I would say a lot of them are child cases, unfortunately. We do get a lot of those. Obviously, we have adult sexual batteries as well. I wouldn't say there is anything that comes in more than anything else. But we're seeing a rise in things like sextortion. I don't know.
Explain that.
So it's like extortion. So it's usually with kids. They will send a picture they'll befriend someone online.
Okay.
Usually over Snapchat or Instagram, something like that. They'll be befriended by either another child or maybe it's usually actually another adult who may pose as another child. They'll befriend them. They'll talk to them. They'll get their trust, and then they'll ask for maybe compromising pictures of them, which these kids will then send, and then say, "I got your pictures now, so either you send more, or I'm going to blast this on the internet." Or you send money, or I'm going to blast this on the internet. It happens to adults too, but it's more geared towards children.
Yeah.
And these pictures are also they end up going out on the internet. They end up going on the deep web as well. Being sold, things like that.
So with a case like that, or even maybe a case that we talked about this earlier, like with a stepfather or a father or something like that, is it usually another parent that brings a child in because they told them that something happened? Or I'm asking, how do the child sex cases, how do they come into the office? How do they get reported?
One or two ways, or one of a few ways actually. They'll either come in from DCF.
Okay.
So they will disclose to a teacher or someone else, and a mandatory reporter will contact DCF.
Yeah, and that's the Department of Children and Families.
Yes, I'm sorry. And then they will contact us, and we'll go from there. Or they'll disclose to a parent or a friend, and they make a phone call to us, and it goes that way.
So how does that investigation work? What's the next step? I mean, do you start interviewing, parents and family friends, and then you kind of see what happens?
It is, and we are fortunate to have partners in the child protection team, and they conduct forensic interviews of children under a certain age. We don't
Okay.
do that.
Oh, okay.
So they are trained. They have all these fancy certifications and master's degrees in these techniques. So they will do a forensic interview of a child, usually if they're under 16.
Okay. So we don't do that here at the agency.
No,
All
we
right.
will go there and watch it, basically, and then they will speak to. They'll ask a lot of open-ended questions and and without really pushing the issue.
Yeah.
And that's really just to get the kids to kind of disclose and talk about what happened.
Okay.
And then we can use that as an interview. We're not going to keep interviewing children. It's traumatizing enough.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not going to keep doing it. And then obviously we're going to interview parents, any outcry witnesses. And when I say outcry witness, it's basically anyone who the child may have told someone else, any witnesses, friends, and then ultimately suspects. And
Okay.
then we'll go from there.
And then if you find out that there's enough evidence, you turn it over to.
Correct.
Okay.
And when we have investigative techniques that we use, which I'm not going to put out there for obvious reasons, but there are other elements to our investigations and techniques and things that we use that are very helpful.
I know you've been doing this a while, but I mean, like when you're watching those interviews, I mean, is it hard to listen to?
Of course, yeah. What I learned to do very early on was separate work from home.
Okay.
So when I go home, I'm done. I don't think about this. I don't work. I don't do it unless I'm on call. That's different.
Uh-huh.
But you really have to separate yourself, and especially when you have children, small children, and you listen to these interviews, you can almost place your own kids in that position, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. So you have to learn to remove yourself from that, which I did. That was never a problem for me. Luckily.
I mean, is that something you have to teach the other people within the unit that,
it's a conversation that we have, definitely, especially when they're new. And myself and the sergeant sit down with them and say, hey, listen, you're going to listen to some horrible things. You're going to listen to things that you didn't think was possible, that people could do to each other, family members can do to each other, people can do to children. You're going to see it. We deal with child pornography as well. So unfortunately, you're going to be exposed to this. You've got to make sure that you're ready for this. You've got to talk to your family, make sure they're okay with this, make sure you have someone to talk to. It's a tough job. And then this is why there are a lot of people who don't want to do this job.
I was going to say, I mean, I've done this podcast for, a few months now, and we'll talk about some of the different units. And I feel like there's a consensus that most people wouldn't want to work in this unit. Not that they don't envy what you do and they don't respect it. It's just, they just don't think they could do it.
No. And I get that. And there are units that I couldn't do, things like, there's a unit next to us that do child abuse. And for some reason, I deal with child sex cases, but the child abuse, I don't know. I just
those are
couldn't do
different.
it.
Those are different units.
Yeah, they're completely different units.
Okay.
So we deal predominantly with sex abuse.
Okay.
They deal with physical abuse.
Okay. All right.
For some reason, that just gets me. But there's maybe because I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say I'm desensitized, because once you become desensitized, that's a problem. But I think it's just a matter of getting used to it and being able to successfully separate your personal life from your work life.
Yeah.
Especially in this unit.
I know you watched these interviews. I mean, with the children, are they usually? I assume they're pretty cooperative. Do they understand what's going on?
Depends on their age. Mm-hmm. Some of them do. Some of them are. We meet 7 or 8 year olds who are so articulate and they're able to disclose in detail the things that have happened to them. And it's like, and a lot of them are very nonchalant about it, especially the ones who have been experiencing abuse for a long time.
Yeah. Well, they don't know
any better. It's a way of life for them. Mm-hmm. That's hard. That's harder than the ones that break down and cry, because it's like they're so used to it, and it's horrible. And then you do get ones who it takes a lot to get them talking.
Yeah.
Which I get. It's scary. You
Yeah.
know? And especially when the perpetrator is a close family member, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to get that other person in trouble. I hear all the time, I don't want them to get into trouble.
Yeah.
I don't want to break my family up.
Yeah.
They just don't get it.
Is it usually, I mean, I don't say usually, but is it a lot of times, is it a family member? Is it a cousin, an uncle, a friend?
Yeah, most sex crimes are committed by a known suspect.
Uh-huh.
It's so rare that we get an unknown out in the street, someone gets dragged into the bushes and sexually battered.
And those are the ones that get all the news coverage, and I get it, but
yeah, absolutely,
it's not like
so
that.
rare, it doesn't really happen that often. And when it does, it's a big deal, but it's very rare.
Huh.
Usually it's always by someone that they know. So it's a family member, very close. It could be a parent, biological parent, a step parent, siblings. We got a lot of child-on-child stuff, which that necessarily doesn't come to criminal. I mean, and that's a different issue. I mean, that's more of a Department of Children and Families. Children at a certain age don't know any different, and they're kind of exploring sexuality, and it's, you know, I'll show me yours, you show me mine. It's normal. It's actually normal child behavior, but because of recent laws, things like the Sandusky law, it has to be reported. But we're not going to follow up with that. That we make sure that these Department of Children and Families follow up and make sure that everyone's safe. And I'm sorry.
I was going to say, but it's not just like child sex crimes that you deal with. It's also adults too.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, and it's usually again, it could be domestic in nature, a husband and wife kind of situation where a sexual battery is, or a boyfriend, or a date. A lot of people go out on a date and end up sexually battered, unfortunately. So I would say 98% of the time it's a known suspect.
Okay, all right. So then with the adults, I mean, I'm assuming the interviews are different because you would conduct the interviews with adults.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And if it's an adult with an adult mental capacity, because we've had victims who are physically adults, however mentally not. Okay. And they will be forensically interviewed.
And these are things that I don't even think about.
Right.
I mean, I know they happen and you see them on TV and in the news, but when I was preparing for this interview, you know, thinking of questions, I would have never even thought to ask something like that. But
we do get a lot with elderly, you know, dementia patients, you know, things like that. Those are tough cases because how do you effectively interview someone who doesn't have the mental capacity to hold a conversation?
How do you? What do you do?
It's tough. You do your best. You speak with family members, and then you have to look at things like DNA. Then that's really what it comes down to. Thankfully, we don't get a lot of those. Those again are very rare. The elderly sexual batteries we've had that I can remember for the most part have been mentally competent and been able to be interviewed successfully. But it's, you could have an adult with a mental capacity of a 6-year-old. We're not going to interview them. We're going to give those off to the child protection team.
Now, when you say sexual battery, what does that mean exactly?
It is a forced, penetrative sex act that is not consensual.
So is that different than rape or is that rape?
No, it's rape.
Okay, that's rape. Okay, all right. It's just another term.
It is. It's in some states it's rape. It's all sorts of different things. Here in Florida, it's sexual battery.
Okay, all right.
And then you have different, like capital sexual battery is 12 and under.
Okay.
And then you have unlawful sex with certain minors, which is certain age groups.
Okay, that's different.
Yeah, and then you have lewd batteries, which are different age groups too.
Okay, so there's all these different sort of the terminology for. There's just different sort of states of it, I guess.
Right.
Or, okay, all right.
Different statute of limitations, different age groups, different laws.
Okay, so let's say somebody comes here. We'll say a woman comes in here and says, I was sexually battered. What happens then? I mean, do you, same thing, you go out and you interview her, then you maybe go interview the person that she says does it, and then you sort of figure it out from there? Or?
Depends. It depends on the time frame. So if it happened within a 5-day window, that is the window that we can potentially collect DNA.
Okay.
And that's when we would escort them down to the sexual assault treatment center that we have in Central Florida, in Orlando, where they would have a sexual assault examination, which is for the collection of DNA, any DNA evidence.
Okay. Is that, I think I've heard, is that a rape kit? Is that different?
Yes, it's called a rape kit.
That's what some people call it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so from there, they can, like you said, collect evidence?
So there's some evidence there, depending on what it could be. And they have access to victim advocates through the Victim Service Center that we're also partnered with. And the Sexual Assault Treatment Center, where they have a specialized nurse conduct the sexual assault exam.
Okay. Are those hard cases to prove? I mean, if it's, one man, one woman, and
the hard ones to prove are the delayed disclosure, which is usually after the 5-day window, we can't get any DNA. Okay. Some people don't disclose for years. Yeah. Which I understand sometimes they just don't, especially kids. They'll come to us as adults and say, this is what happened when I was a child. And I get the reasoning behind that. I get the reasoning for delayed disclosures completely, to be honest. But if we don't have that DNA and we have no other evidence except one person saying one thing and the other person saying another, that's hard to prove. Yeah. Now, we do have other techniques that we use to try and, get around that. But if nothing comes of that, I mean, it's not that we forget about it and throw it away and file it away for another day.
Yeah.
It's something we'll discuss with the state attorney's office, see, how do you feel about this? Is this something that you can go with? And we all kind of talk to each other and figure out the best course of action.
Because there could be, text messages or emails or
all
kinds of. And we had a
things.
pretty faint. I don't want to say. We had a case here recently, not in Orange County, but in Central Florida, with a reverend that he got in trouble for raping a teenage girl, and he committed suicide in the last month or so. And I don't know if they had any physical evidence for that, but they found text messages, and he basically said it on a recorded line. But that goes back to this happened years ago, 10 years ago or so. But you don't stop going for those cases.
No, of course not. Especially if the statute of limitations is good, which means that we can still prosecute. We'll do everything that we can to investigate. But I mean, I know as a detective, I've had cases that were 30, 35 years old,
really,
and got a conviction.
Huh?
Yeah.
So how does that? I mean, just keep working at it.
You keep working. You do your due diligence. You speak to everyone. Like I said, I mentioned before, there's certain techniques that we use, and that was fruitful. And it happens. We're able to do it.
Yeah. So with, like, let's say somebody comes in and reports a sexual battery, and I know there's no average time, typical time, but I mean, but can you talk about maybe the time frame that some of these take? I mean, I'm sure it takes. It's not like you see on TV. Is what I'm getting at. It's not an open and shut thing.
Yeah, we don't get DNA back in 3 hours like you see on TV. DNA can take months and months and months to come back because it's done through FDLE.
Yeah, and we have a new system here where they can do it quickly, but it's not the same.
It's not the same.
You have to take it to FDLE.
Correct.
To do that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's all still kind of in the works, but per statute it has to go to FDLE for sex assaults, at least anyway. So that can take months. Now we can request, depending on the case, a rush, but it has to be under certain circumstances and specific circumstances. But it can take months and months and months to get DNA back. So it may seem that we're not doing anything, but we kind of stalled until we get that DNA back.
Yeah.
And once we get that DNA back, we can move forward. And also, speaking of DNA, we can get we've had cases recently where we've got DNA hits back from cases that are 20 years old. They are now just testing.
Really?
Yeah. And now, this comes back to this person. So we have a lead after, from a case from 99.
Huh. And I guess what I'm getting at also is, these cases can take months and years, even if you're working on them, because, like you said, it takes time for DNA, and then the court system takes a long time. So I'm sure you get to know some of these victims over the course of months and years, and they'll come in. They'll probably have to pop in here every now and then and just get updates. And so I'm sure you get to know some of these people pretty well.
And I know a lot. Some of the detective out there, they've formed some good relationships with victims or victims' parents. They've received letters of commendation. They've received accolades. I ran into a woman very recently that from a case that I worked years ago, who I didn't recognize at first. I had no idea who it was. And she came and hugged me and said, "Oh, thank you for everything that you do." She was crying. She said, my daughter is now an advocate for sex abuse. She speaks to other kids about sexual assaults. And I found that very rewarding. It means I did something right.
I don't even know the answer to this. Do we offer any services after, maybe they've gone through the system and maybe the person that they accused has gone to jail? Do we offer continuing services, or does somebody at least?
Yeah, that's usually done through the Victim Service Center.
Okay.
They have advocates and they work with them throughout the entire process. The state attorney have victim advocates that also go through them every step of the way of that process. We have victim advocates here, obviously, as well, but the ones that our victims usually work with are at the Victim Service Center. Okay. And then for children, they have support services through Department of Children and Families and the Child Protection Team.
Okay. All right. So we talked a little bit earlier about like cyber crime and cyber sex crime. So you said you have one person here that sort of specializes in that?
In our unit, yeah. He does for the tips that come in, basically, about this person is downloading child pornography, and so he goes and runs with those tips. He'll either go and knock on the door, because they'll do warrants for IP addresses and things like that to try and figure out where these pictures are originating from. A lot of them are not even in the country.
I was going to say, I'm sure a lot come from all over the world.
Yeah, they do.
And you can't really, I don't want to say you can't do anything about it, but no. I'm sure you
really
can't do anything about it.
Yeah, there's only so much I can do from a picture coming in from Russia.
Yeah.
But we can speak to the person who's downloading it. because that's a crime in itself.
Yeah.
So, but we've had cases where they've been trading thousands of images. You know, we've had cases that the FBI have picked up for federal charges, things like that.
Yeah.
So child pornography, unfortunately, is getting worse just because of the technology that we have available to us now.
Plus, I'm sure some of it has to do, like you said, the ease of it too. Technology makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah.
I mean, before, if you think 20, 25 years ago, I mean, first of all, computers were slow and modems were slow,
Right.
and now, everything's super fast. And then you add phones into it, and now everybody has a supercomputer in their pocket
Yeah.
that they can, download things and take pictures of things and trade them and, all of that. And so it sounds to me just like a cat and mouse game that is just constantly, you're having
you can't catch up.
Yeah.
You can't. All we can do is find the people who are downloading it, viewing it, trading it, and obviously we'll take their electronics with a warrant. We'll take their phone. We have a digital forensics unit here that's attached to us that will go through all that stuff. And like I said, we've found you see some very disturbing things.
And I was just going to bring that up. I mean, I'm sure you have to see some pretty disgusting things, but you said at the beginning, I mean, I know the people that get into this, they kind of know what they're getting into. And I assume, like you, they get into it because they want to make a difference. Right.
Yeah, I think it takes a certain kind of person to be able to do this and do it long term.
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, a lot of people say, well, your homicide stuff, of course it is. You're dealing with dead people. I get that. But when you're dealing with sex abuse, especially on children, infants, things like that, it's hard. It's hard. So we make sure that we keep a close eye on everyone, make sure everyone's doing good and things like that. But yeah, it's not everyone can do it. It's hard.
So back to the cyber sex crime. I know you said you go after people that might have child pornography on their phones, but like, do you also go after people that are trying to like meet up with kids?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. If we have, again, the same kind of situation, someone will befriend a child and they'll start talking, and then, but again, it depends as well, because we also have a sex offender unit here.
Okay.
And they
that's
deal
different.
a lot of that. Yeah, that's different from us.
All right.
So there is a sexual offender squad here. They deal a lot with, especially sex offenders who are still committing crimes.
Yeah.
So that would go to them. Not necessarily all of them. We will work some of them as well, but we do have that unit too that we work with.
Okay.
But when you're talking about things like traveling to meet a minor and things like that, we would definitely work.
And
those.
you see that a lot on the news, especially one of the counties around here. They're pretty well known for
their stings
that.
And things. Yeah, I know, and it's and good on them for doing that. I think that's something that we'll be looking at in the future.
Okay.
To bump that up a bit, hopefully. But yeah, that's definitely something. Thankfully we don't see it very often.
Okay.
Here in Orange County. But when it does come up, that's obviously something we work.
Does the fact that we get so many tourists here sort of make your job even more difficult?
It does when they go home and they're a victim, and it's like we actually, thankfully, we've worked with. It helped me being British as well, because I've been talking to some people overseas in Europe who are a victim of a crime here. And thankfully, they managed to. They are cooperative and kept in touch and things like that. So that's lucky. A lot of the time that we'll never hear from or see them again, or we try and contact them. The time difference is hard, things like that. Or they're just like, I don't live here. I'm just going to go home.
Really?
About it. Yeah.
Okay.
But we always tell everyone, these cases, even if we can't do anything at the time or you're not ready to do anything right now, they're not going to go away.
And we're here too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's not like we throw them in the shredder and they're forgotten about. That we have them, and then whenever you're ready to reopen, we can reopen and go forward.
Yeah.
But we do express to them, especially if it's an acute case, the importance of getting that DNA if we can.
Yes.
Because after 5 days, it's gone.
So you've been doing this several years now. Does anything surprise you?
I don't know if it surprises me as such. Unfortunately, it's some things I hear and see, and I'm just like, that's a new one. That's the first one and then some of it is just you think you see and deal with horrible cases, and then one comes in that just breaks your heart. You know, It happens all the time.
Yeah.
But again, you have to do what's best for your victim. You have to do what's best for the family. You have to do what's best for the case. And I can't stress the importance enough of separating your personal life from that.
So what's sort of the future of this? I mean, is there new technology that helps you? Is there new techniques that help you, or is this just sort of old school police work that you guys got to kind of get out there and make phone calls and do interviews?
Well, we have to keep up with the times, especially with technology as well. As when kids are using these apps that we have no idea what these things are, so we have to keep on top of that. Changing technology is a big one. Because a lot of this stuff is done, a lot of evidence is on phones.
Yeah,
pictures, text messages, like we talked about earlier. It's we all have to keep up to date with that, and our digital forensics unit have to keep up to date with all that as well.
And phones can be hard to get into. I know there's a lot of privacy, and I get it. Like, you don't want people breaking into your phone, but then when it maybe comes to something like child pornography,
we need to get in there.
Yeah,
and they have ways and means of doing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a long time to do. Sometimes it's pretty easy. And occasionally we'll get suspects who are like, yeah, this is my PIN code.
Really?
Yeah.
They'll
just give you the code.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that makes it easy. That
makes
for
it
you.
very easy, yeah.
Is there like an evolution to it? And what I mean by that is, maybe does it eventually evolve into, let's say you're looking at child pornography, and then is the next step maybe meeting a child, or is that the biggest sort of concern?
That's always the biggest concern. A lot of people that we've spoken to look at child pornography, it stops there. They don't act upon it. Unfortunately, it does, for a lot of them, we will progress to curious, what is this? To, I'll try that. And then we have a lot of suspects or defendants who are victims of abuse themselves.
Yeah.
So you get that cycle of abuse. So it happened to them when they were kids, and how they maybe reconcile with it is to act on what happened to them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that a lot of defendants that I've spoken to, I've interviewed, have said, well, yeah, it happened to me when I was 5.
Okay.
It happens a lot.
And so in their mind, do they just think it's okay? Or?
They know it's not okay. I mean, they're competent adults at this point, and they realize that. But because they are victims of abuse themselves, and I'm not saying that this is an out for them, this is an excuse, because it's not. Because we have a lot of most victims of sex assault don't become perpetrators themselves. Yeah. But some of the ones that I've spoken to have been victims. So it's not an excuse. They know better. They know that it shouldn't have happened to them, so why are you doing it to someone else? But I think it's just there's something psychological that they have to do it too.
Yeah.
In one instance, I remember I had one person say, and they were a bit younger, but they said, I wanted them to know what it felt like to happen to me. And it was sad.
Yeah.
It was actually kind of sad. Yeah.
Oh. So I've also asked people this: how do you deal with this? I mean, when you say at the end of the day it's done, I go home, and so like how do you sort of de-stress from the things you do?
Well, I have a son that takes up most of my time, my free time. I just don't. I try not to. The thing is, because as a supervisor, I have an agency phone and I'm obligated to answer it. As a supervisor, I'm obligated to check my emails and things like that. I just don't. I'll go off into a room and deal with work and leave the family in another room and deal with it and come back and it's gone. It's forgotten about. I'm now focused on my family. Or I've just started actually doing CrossFit.
Okay, all right, good. Good.
That's a good distressor. I'm actually working with another deputy here who's a trainer and been doing that for about a week.
It can be stressful when you're doing all those burpees, though.
I don't even want to talk about burpees right now. But that I found that I used to run. Every other day I was running a couple of miles. That helped clear my head. But I found that exercise is definitely helping.
Is there any advice you'd give to somebody who wants to either get into this work or get into this work?
Make sure that you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Do some cross training. Don't just come up without knowing exactly what it is that we do. Know the amount of hours that we work, because we can get a call out that can be 24 hours long, if not more.
Okay.
Make sure that your family are good with it. You need to communicate with your family, significant others, whoever. Even if you don't live with someone, talk to whoever you're close with about what you're going to do, what you're going to see, and what it entails, and make sure that you're good with it.
Yeah. And what
because
about-
there's no shame in not being able to do it. There's
Yeah.
no shame in it.
No, I mean, I like I said, I
Yeah.
don't think I could do this.
Right.
I mean, even hearing the stories is hard, and I don't have to see any.
Right.
And this is my last question. What about, and I know with victims, I mean, is there anything you tell people is there a way to stay safe, or is this just something that, can happen to people? And I guess the way is to, if something does happen, make sure you come to the authorities right away. I mean, how do you not become a victim of this?
It depends on the crime, because I've spoken to parents who are the parents of a child and their spouse has been abusing them, and they said they blame themselves. I should have seen it. I should have known what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is, no, because why would you think that they were doing anything to your kid?
Yeah.
Especially if your child is not disclosing to you, or their behavior hasn't changed. Why would you?
Yeah, and I'm sure the other parent, I mean, that's their whole thing. They don't want you to know, so
Exactly.
they go out of the way to make sure you don't.
Exactly. And you're not looking for it.
Mm-mm.
Unless you married someone abuses children, you're not going to be looking for it.
Yeah.
So it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the best thing to do, I would say, is to anybody, children, if they're a victim, tell someone straight away.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully parents are talking about stranger danger.
Mm-hmm.
People who are going out on dates, be aware of your surroundings, go somewhere public, things like that, until you get to know people.
Yeah.
And those who are in domestic situations, who are victims themselves, I know it's difficult to come forward, and a lot of women have said to me, well, I didn't think you'd believe me because we're married and things like that. And people from different cultures have different ways of thinking about things as well. Well, back home in my culture, this was acceptable. If the husband wanted to have sex and we had to give, I'm like, well, you're in America and that's not the way it goes here.
Yeah.
So it's getting around that as well. So I think the main piece of advice is, if you think there's something going on to someone else, or you're a victim yourself, just come forward. There are things that we can do to make sure that you're safe after the process.
Yeah. All right. Well, Corporal Harper, thank you so much for chatting with us.
No problem.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Star. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Jon Busdeker, and this is Behind the Star.